Good day, class. Let's now talk about lesson 2 of this unit. This time, let's learn about the different literary pieces from Luzon, or the literature from Luzon. In this particular lesson, I want you to take down important notes as to what you have learned on the different literary pieces that comes from the islands of Luzon, or the regions in Luzon, and how these literary pieces are influenced by the different group of individuals and ethnic communities that live in the island of Luzon. Now let's begin our discussion. Our main objective for this lesson is to identify some of the major literary works from Luzon and relate the theme and message of the literature from Luzon in the present context. So there will be an integration of how these literary pieces or literary works from Luzon are integrated right into the present context and how it shapes the different culture or the cultural aspects as Filipinos. Now, here is a very essential question that I would like to ask everybody. Why are epics important in a society? In our previous lesson, we learned that epics are those stories narrated whose main character is all about heroes or tribal heroes in this context. Now the question is, why are epics important in a particular society? What does this bring, or what does this contribute to the society in general, to the norms, principles, beliefs, practices of a particular society? So in this lesson, we are going to be talking about how these epics or literary works from Luzon influence or are important to a particular society in the Philippines. Now, here are some vocabulary words that we are going to be encountering as we have our discussion for this particular lesson. First, we have obstinate. This is an adjective which means refusing to change behavior or ideas. Example, I tried to persuade him not to go out so late at night, but he was obstinate about going to the party. Next is prowess. Prowess is a noun which means skill in combat, high level of ability. Example, many heroes in popular culture are portrayed with supernatural powers or prowess. Another is crude. Crude is an adjective which means unrefined. Example of this, because I was just a beginner at pottery, my homemade vase was very crude. Another, ebb. Ebb is a verb which means gradually lessening or disappearing. Example, my headache started to ebb after I took the painkiller. And lastly is troublesome. Troublesome is an adjective which means causing difficulty or annoyance. Example, he's a good boy now, but when he was 2, my brother was very troublesome. So take note of these vocabulary words because we are going to be encountering them as we go along with our discussion with this lesson. No? So, in this time, at this point, let us now try to understand Luzon in general or in the broad sense. So Luzon, class, is the largest island group in the Philippines, divided into 8 regions, which is comprised by the Ilocos region, Cagayan Valley region, Cordillera Administrative Region or CAR, the National Capital Region or the NCR, the Bicol region, Central Luzon, Mimaropa, and the Calabarzon. The major regional languages in Luzon include, but not limited to, Bicolano, Ilocano, Kapampangan, Pangasinense, and Tagalog. Some ethnic groups that reside in the islands of Luzon are the following: Aitas, Igorots, Ibaloy, Mangyans, Apayao, Kalinga, and Itnegs. So these are only few of the very vast information that we can get out of the island of Luzon. And take note that it is in Luzon that the capital of our country is identified or is located, which is Manila. Now, let's now try to discuss, right, the different examples of literary works that hail or that started or originated from Luzon. I will be giving you very brief history or explanations or backgrounds of these literature or literary pieces that originated from or is influenced and inspired from different occurrences, phenomena, and happenings and characters that are from Luzon. All right. Let's first begin with Biyag de Lamang. Biyag de Lamang originates from Ilocos region, or this is a literature from the Ilocos region. This is an epic about Lamang. Lamang is a man with extraordinary strength who sets out to find his missing father, Don Juan. So take note that Biyag ni Lamang is an epic of a son who has extraordinary strength that is looking, searching for his father, Don Juan. And then with that journey or with that adventure of Lamang, aduna na karoy mga nagkadaiyang mga examples or characters, settings, and the plots, right? As well as the plot twists in the story of Lamang. So that is Biyag ni Lamang. Another is a literature from the Cagayan Valley. It has different versions, but we are going to be giving the first version as an example. We have the legend of Magat River. This is a legend about Magat, a handsome and strong-willed youth who saved a lovely maiden in a stream from the clutches of a python. So that is the legend of the Magat River. So anong gitawag siya Magat River? It's because it was in that particular stream, right, where Magat saved a lovely maiden from a python. That's why it is called the legend of Magat River. Another is from the Cordillera Administrative Region or CAR. We have Aliguyon. This is an epic. Aliguyon is about a series of mortal combats between Aliguyon and Pumbakayon to settle a tribal feud. So this is like the stories that we or the teleseries that we can see in GMA Network. Adunay mga nagkadaiya nga mga folklores, epics, stories that originate from Philippine literature, but they are more of kanabitang what we see in the international movies. Adunay feud, adunay conflict, and they try to settle it. So these are this is one of the examples of that from the Cordillera Administrative Region, Aliguyon. So nasa mga stories about encounters of war, mortal combats between Aliguyon and Pumbakayon that aims to settle a particular tribal feud. Another is from the National Capital Region, a very famous Philippine literature. I hope you were able to read this one. Footnote to Youth. This is a short story about Dodong, who wanted to marry Teang. Both were young. So when Dodong asked his father, he was met with silence. The two ended up getting married anyway, but later on, they both start to think about even regret doing so. So this is a very important literary piece, if you ask me, because this is talking about how a particular decision of the youth can shape and influence the trajectory of his or her life. So in this story, or in this short story, Footnote to Youth, Dodong here wanted to marry Teang at such a young age. However, when they were consulting their parents, they were met with silence. Now, with that silence came the idea that if you will get married, then you will really, make the decisions on your own. Face the tribulations and the challenges on your own with little to no help or assistance from your parents. Now, when they both got married, Dodong and Teang, then they realized that it was really impossible for them to settle in that particular setting. Hence, they were starting to regret the decision of marrying. That's why it is Footnote to Youth, because it is an eye-opener. It liberates us, the youth, on what we really want to achieve in life. Get married immediately, or make sure that you get to enjoy life first at its fullest. So one idea, a very important component of how we should make decisions as a youth. Because remember, the decisions that we do today will become implications of how our future will be or how our future will unfold. Meaning to say, the hard work that we do today or the lackluster efforts that we exert will become determinants, o kung unsa ang ato ang mamahimo nga kaugmaon. So if you have this hardworking attitude right now, definitely if it is maintained consistently and with no pressure, ultimately, it will benefit you in the long run. Pero kung tapulan ka karon, nya dili nimo na siya bag-uhon eventually, ultimately, mahimo ra pud kang tapulan. So that is what the short story Footnote to Youth is trying to tell us, that our decisions as the youth will ultimately influence largely how our life will become, especially if we get older. Muna, it's a very important thing that we get to read, we get to understand these literary pieces because this is in the context of the Philippines or in our society, right, as Filipinos. So, para dapat makasabot ta how this influences or shapes the morale of a particular individual that contributes to the society at large. All right. Another is from the Bicol region. This is titled Ibalon or Ibalong. This is an epic about three heroes, Baltog, Handyong, and Bantong, who all defeated their adversaries. Going back, so Ibalon talks about an epic of three heroes, Baltog, Handyong, and Bantong, who all defeat their adversaries. So this is like a series class, a mini-series within a particular epic that will talk about how these heroes were able to defeat their respective adversaries, and most of all, how they triumph with the challenges and tribulations that they faced. Another is from Central Luzon, Atin Ko Pong Sing Sing. This is a children's folk song about a child who lost the ring given to her by her mother. So this is a very interesting take on how our lineages are being passed on through different symbolisms such as a ring. Another is Tagbanwa myth from Mimaropa. This is a myth about the first man named Adan, who was like a stone, for he could not speak. So this is related to the tribe of the Tagbanwa. So we talk about the first man, Adan, who, just like a stone, was not able to speak. So it unravels now how the myth influenced a particular societal or how a particular culture, in the sense that with this myth, stems the different understanding of different ideologies, different ideas of how it came to be. And lastly is from Calabarzon, the legend of Maria Makili. Something that we hear from time to time because this is one of the famous Philippine literary pieces that originates from Luzon. This is a story about a mountain in Laguna called Makiling or Mount Makiling. This was guarded by a fairy named Maria. The townsfolk fondly called her Mariang Makiling. So muna siya ang buod or highlight or a brief summary of this particular literary piece from Calabarzon, na in Laguna kuno adunay bukid named Makiling. Now kaning nga bukid ginagwardyahan or ginabantayan sa usa ka fairy nga ginatawag or that was named Maria. That's why the people called her Mariang Makiling. Now, with this class, I want you to read this legend of Magat River from Cagayan Valley. We all already know what is the summary of this particular legend or literary piece, but I still want you to read it because this is a very interesting take, right? So allow me now to read to you the legend of Magat River, a Cagayan Valley legend. A long time ago, there lived in Bayumbong a tall, handsome man called Magat. He was young and strong, and fast as a hunter, and sure in his spear shot. He could run as fast as a deer, and strong as he was, he could down a bull with ease. He was strong-willed and obstinate, but he was also kind and gentle. Except for a few who envied his prowess, everybody in the village loved and respected him. Magat loved outdoor life and roamed in the forest surrounding the struggling settlement. One day, fired by adventure, he wandered farther than usual. Soon night came. Being far from home, he kindled a fire in his crude, primitive way. He lay beside the fire and fell asleep. Early the next morning,
he pursued his solitary way. Finally, he came upon the largest stream he had ever seen. He stopped and crawled noisily to the bank of the river near the fall. Upon parting the tall grasses, he beheld a lovely sight just across the stream. Beneath the shade of the outspreading branches of the big balete tree was a very beautiful maiden. She was bathing and was nude from the waist up. She was the most beautiful woman Magat had ever seen, and he fell in love with her at first sight. From where he was hiding, Magat's attention was attracted by a silent movement on a spreading branch. Magat saw a great python coiled around the branch, which was ready to attack the beautiful woman. He jumped backward. The noise he made drew the attention of the maiden, who, turning around, saw him poise a spear. She mistook his attitude for hostility and ducked underwater. Just as the python sprang, the spear flew from Magat's hand. The snake was struck right through the eyes and brain. The next moment, Magat was in the water and carried the beautiful maiden ashore. She struggled a little but did not scream as she modestly tried to cover her body with her long, dark hair. Magat pointed to the writhing python. Upon seeing it, she screamed instinctively and drew close to Magat, who put a protecting arm around her lovely shoulders. Gratitude and admiration were all over her pretty face. Magat picked up his broken spear and went back to the young woman. They wandered around in the forest. Under the spell of nature, Magat asked the woman to be his wife. The woman, after making Magat promise in the name of the great Kabunian not to see her at noon, consented. He brought her home and made a cozy room for her. Everything went well and happily for a while, but the passing days, his curiosity mounted more and more, and at last it grew out of bounds. One noon, he broke his promise and broke into his wife's seclusion. In his wife's bed of soft leaves and grasses, he beheld a sight that chilled his heart. A great crocodile was lying in his wife's bed. Believing that his wife had met a horrible death, he rushed to the kitchen, fetched an ugly weapon, and returned to his wife's room. He raised his weapon to kill the crocodile when suddenly he saw his wife on the bed instead of the crocodile. His wife was dying. "You broke your promise. I can no longer be happy nor alive nor live any longer. I must die." His wife sobbed. Slowly, life ebbed from her. On her beautiful skin, scales appeared as she turned into a crocodile before his very eyes. That was his punishment for having broken his promise made in the name of Kabunian. Sadly, Magat buried the dead crocodile in his front yard. Worn out by grief for his lack of fidelity to his word and over the death of his lovely wife, he drowned himself and his miseries in the same stream where they met, which grew into the mighty troublesome Magat River. So this is the origin of why that particular stream is called Magat River. So you can take away all the moral of this story, the moral lessons, and integrate it, how we can be able to foster this into our present relationships. If we are able to promise something to our kin, to our partners, to our lovers, to our parents, or to ourselves, we always must keep it in order for it to continue, to progress, and to blossom. Now, class, with this particular story, there comes guide questions. In order for us to understand better, I want you to answer these guide questions para masabtan nato how this particular story came to be, what happened, what entails this story, what lesson entails this story, and how can we relate to the lessons from this story. This is kanang fictional, obviously, but then again, we need to understand how we can relate to this particular story, right? Now, with that being said, let's now try to integrate the values that we have learned from this lesson. How does learning about literature from Luzon help you understand your fellow Filipinos better? At a time where great division because of political colors and identities is at hand nowadays, how can we best learn to live and understand with one another as Filipinos, filled with diversity of different cultures, ethnicities, principles, and beliefs, but then again should be united as Filipinos in these trying times and uncertain times of the pandemic? I want you to think about this, and I want you to understand how this will become very, very important as we go along with our journey and with our different lessons in life. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you were able to learn a thing or two from this discussion.